Hello and welcome to Livewire's Buy, Hold, Sell. I'm Ali Selby, and today we're putting the ASX's small and mid-cap management teams to the test. Management teams can really make or break a business, so to find out who is the real cream of the crop, we're joined by Ben Rundle from Hayborough Investment Partners and Nathan Hughes from Perpetual. Ben, I'm going to start with you today. What does it take to make an awesome management team? What factors are you typically looking for?
I mean, typically the first thing we probably look at is alignment. So we really like founder-led businesses. When you have a management team who owns a significant stake in the company, they usually make decisions on behalf of that stake and therefore on behalf of shareholders. The alternative to that is you get a CEO who comes into a company who doesn't have a stake, and they might make an acquisition because they're using other people's funds. They might drive short-term incentives for the business, and that can sometimes be at the detriment to long-term returns. So I guess alignment's probably the key thing we look at. Over
to you, Nathan. What do top teams do that makes them stand out from the rest of the pack?
Look, I actually agree with Ben wholeheartedly on that. Alignment is something we look for, but there's a couple of other things we look for as well at Perpetual. We're looking for people who are all over the details, and that comes through when you meet management teams, the passion they have for running their business and the level of knowledge they have over the intricate parts of their operations. We're looking for conviction in sticking to a really clearly articulated strategy and not deviating from that on short-term things. We're also looking for a little bit of humility in management teams as well. So we need a degree of confidence and conviction that they're doing the right things, but they're also quite humble in the way they go about things.
I feel like we hear time and time again that fund managers love founders. Why is that particularly important when it comes to small and mid-cap stocks?
Look, I think in my perspective, founder-led businesses, to Ben's earlier comments, they take a long-term view of things. So they're thinking about their own wealth, their own capital, and something they've built with their bare hands typically, but they also take a longer-term mindset. So they're not pressured by the market or the next results or the next earnings call. They're thinking about what's the best thing to do for this business on a long-term view. They often keep pretty strong balance sheets as well, which is something we look out for at Perpetual and we're very fond of.
Okay, over to you, Ben. On the other side of that, what are some red flags that you think investors should look out for?
Well, a key red flag for us is actually when you see the words transformational acquisition. And you usually see that from a management team who doesn't have a significant stake, because a management team that does is not going to risk their business for a business that they don't know. And usually, when you're buying a business, the seller is going to know more than you are. So the words transformational acquisition is a huge red flag for us. Balance sheet is also a problem as well. But as Nathan pointed out, when these founders have their own money at stake, often you see them less likely to put that stake at risk by taking on too much debt. Not always. There are some founders who don't like to dilute and they do take on they do take on debt, but in the most cases, they're pretty cautious about where they spend their capital.
Are there any other red flags that you'd want to add?
Look, I think sometimes poorly designed REM schemes, so it really emphasises the short-term incentives for the management team, and sometimes that leads them to make decisions that feel good. So they might make a short-term acquisition because it's EPS accretive, but it puts the balance sheet at risk and may leave the business in a worse spot in 2 to 3 years' time. So really just thinking about how they're incentivised and whether there's any risks in the way that their remuneration package is set up. The other one, which is a little bit quirky, red flag for us, is when the management team is in the press a lot or in glossy magazine photo shoots.
Okay, that's a good red flag. Let's get into some of the best management teams in the country now. We're going to be looking at small and mid-cap stocks. We're going to define that as X50 stocks. Ben, I'm going to start with you. What do you think is the best management team in the tech sector?
The tech sector, I think, is probably Tony Walls from Objective Corp. It's probably a name that not a lot of people are familiar with because he's not the sort of manager who's very promotional. But since he listed the business, he's taken the shares on issue down by about 15%. That's something we really look at closely, is equity dilution from the issuance of extra shares. And he's actually gone the other way and he's bought shares back. He's never sold a share in his over 20 years of having the company listed. He spends money on behalf of the company thinking about a 10-year time frame rather than thinking about next year. So he portrays a lot of the things we look for in a really quality management team.
Okay, over to you, Nathan. Who do you think is the creme de la creme in tech?
Creme de la creme. Well, so a bit of a sleeper. We have a really high opinion of Jens Monsees at Infomedia. So he's not just a tech CEO, but we think he's doing a really good job there. He's got 4 min turnarounds before, but he's a really passionate guy. He gets out, he pounds the pavements, he knows the customer well, so he's super highly motivated, and we think that's exactly what the business needed, and we think he's doing a fantastic job.
How about in financials?
In financials, look, I'd nominate Ian McCown of Pinnacle, looking at the business he's built over a number of years. I think what sets Ian apart is his ability to attract key talent and retain. With funds management businesses, you've got a lot of competing interests, so there's different styles, but firms competing under one roof at Pinnacle. He's done a terrific job keeping them all happy, performing well, but also has attracted new talent, and that's enabled him to grow the business for a very long time.
Over to you, Ben. Who's your favourite financials management team?
I think it's probably the Heine family at Netwealth. I think that Michael's done a fantastic job of bringing Matt into that business and showing him early on, what he believes are the key traits of a really good management team. And I think sometimes when businesses can go down a generation, there's risk to that. But I think in this case, Matt's been in the business so long and he's been taught so well. And I think the family just really knows how to do business well and do the right thing by shareholders. So we're lucky to have them as a management team.
How about in retail? People are worried about a weakening consumer over the next few months. Which management team do you think could really sail a company through that economic weakness?
Well, I think it's hard to go past Solomon Lew from Premier Investments. I think he's done a fantastic job and his track record speaks for itself. Brett Blundy's probably also someone to call out in that space who's done really well. And then I think the Nick Scarley guys too do a fantastic job and have shown that, in a business which is fairly consumer facing is probably more resilient than people give them credit for.
Okay, over to you. Who's your favourite?
Can I copy Ben's answer? No, look, I'd agree with all of those, but look, not dissimilar to the Heine family actually. I'd talk about the Robinsons, Glenn and Ian from Beacon Lighting, another family business, and much like the Heine, they actually haven't sold a share since they floated the company. I think it was 2012 or 2013. A lot of the traits that I talked about earlier, passion, attention to detail, but they just run the company with a very long-term mindset, and they've done a terrific job, much like Scarley, in a business which is a cyclical and consumer-facing. They've done a great job over a number of years.
How about in healthcare? Everyone's really hoping that we see a revival in the healthcare sector. Which management team can really help lead a business if we see something like that?
Look, this one's a little bit cheeky actually because the deal hasn't closed yet, but I'd put forward Chemist Warehouse management team should they merge with Sigma. I mean, what they've done in growing that business from a standing start is nothing short of remarkable, but we think there's a massive runway ahead for them. And look, they just continue to take share. There's probably an element of retail in that as well, not purely healthcare, but look, we think they've done a terrific job.
Okay, over to you, Ben. Who's your favourite healthcare management team?
Probably a lesser known guy by the name of David Collins, who's just taken the reins at Paragon Care. Look, I've only had 4 or 5 meetings with him so far, but every meeting I've had, he certainly said the right things. He focused on return on capital. He didn't sell any shares into the deal that he did with the merger of Paragon. Very cost focused. Seems to me to be early on to be a really high quality manager.
Okay, last up today, resources and energy. Who stands out from the rest of the pack?
Well, it's hard to go past Chris Ellison from Mineral Resources. He just has a fantastic track record of capital allocation. But someone similar to Chris who I've come across recently is Bill Beeman from Develop Global. I think he portrays a very similar mindset to what Chris does. He's put a lot of his money into the business himself, and I think we'll be sitting here in 10 years' time thinking he's one of the true stars of the resources industry.
Okay, last one for you today, Nathan. Who's the best in the biz in the resources sector?
Yeah, so I'd nominate Mark Clark of Capricorn, formerly of Regis, and we knew him quite well through his Regis days. But look, in the gold space, it's quite tricky. Capital allocation is difficult, and sadly, a lot of gold companies haven't shown a great track record of generating shareholder value and free cash flow. We like Mark because he's a pretty conservative guy. He's a bit of an under-promise, over-deliver culture. You see he's conservative in how they talk about reserves and resources. And traditionally, he hasn't overspent on CapEx or gold-plated, pardon the pun, some of the assets. So we just think he's been a really sensible allocator of capital, which actually is quite rare in the gold and resource sector.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of Buy, Hold, Sell as much as I did. If you did, why not give it a like? Remember to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels. We're adding so much great content just like this every single week.